Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Edible Education 101. It's really nice to be back and see all of your faces. If you don't mind, it's really nice to turn on your cameras when you can, because our guests really like to see faces, and your reactions makes it a little bit more lively and personal. Welcome back from spring break. It is indeed spring. If you're in the Bay Area, you've been enjoying some amazing weather, lots of flowers blooming. And also, I've been talking to some of you in the office hours, and I know that we're all having a little bit of challenge getting back into the swing of things. But I just want you to know that your teaching team is here to support you and is wants to be responsive to your needs. I know, for instance, one of your classmates just let us know that she had her second vaccine today and she doesn't feel so good, so she's not going to be able to come to class. Someone else let us know that they had some other things going on that were really distracting and difficult, and they needed some more time with their assignment. So I just want to invite you to be in touch with us if you need any kind of extra support or care or time, just to make sure that this course is something that you can enjoy and benefit from, and that it's a source of energy for you as opposed to stress. So I also want to note that it is our GSI Eva Gerfain's birthday today. So happy birthday to Eva. Thank you so much for all your stewardship and duties to the class. I also wanted to share something that happened to me this week that was so just auspicious. I had a visit, my first visitor in over a year, of Mas Masamoto. This is Nikiko's father, who is a dear longtime friend of mine. And not only did he visit in this beautiful purple shirt that matched the ceanothus in my garden, but he actually brought me one of his suncrest peach trees to plant in my garden. So that was a real sign of spring. I just wanted to encourage everyone to do something to mark the beginning of spring. This is a time of renewal. This is a time of great growth and opportunity. And if you haven't taken yourself out for a good long walk, I want to really encourage you to do that. So tonight, we have a wonderful class to talk about climate and food justice. We have several of my favorite longtime community members of Edible Education, Sophie Egan, a Berkeley grad, and Turow-Paul, a dear friend. Both of these people, I like to think of them, they are change makers. They are evidence-based writers. They are very influential in shaping the conversation of the of really food systems transformation. And then we're going to enjoy the company of Dr. Linda Shiue, who is a doctor here in San Francisco at Kaiser Permanente and leads up their teaching kitchen activities. And Linda just published a brand new cookbook this month, and she is going to cook with us for dinner tonight. We sent ahead some of the recipes and the ingredients, so I'm hoping we're going to see some of you be cooking along with us. So, and then next week, we're going to also make it very interactive. Caleb from La Cocina, from in San Francisco, he's the executive director. He's going to join us with several of the entrepreneurs from La Cocina, and there's going to be an opportunity to acquire the ingredients if you want to cook along, and we're going to send out an announcement on that tomorrow, but you'll have to act fast so that we can either arrange to get them to you or you can pick them up. I'm not sure about all the logistics on that, but just a heads up. So tonight, before our guests get going, I want to talk a little bit about mission, vision, and values, and how we track patterns to identify opportunities. In the papers that you did last time for your homework, where you identified a problem that was of concern or interest to you, and you stated sort of the problem and the mission, what you wanted to accomplish, the vision of the outcome that you were desiring. And we had some really great papers. I just want to compliment a couple shout outs to Timothy Wong, Una Frauenfelder, and Saumya Goyal. Your papers were particularly exciting to me and the teaching team. And I just want to thank you for the good work on that. So let me start with this. So in this class, we've had the opportunity to meet with some really remarkable change makers who have shared their stories, have shared their sense of purpose and the results and outcomes they're driving, from People's Kitchen Collaborative to Dolores Huerta, Al Gore, Alice Waters. We've had an amazing selection and collection of exceptional people. And I think one of the things that they all share is a mindset of empowerment, and they work from the set of core values that they carry as people, and they have managed to translate those values, personal values, into organizational values. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight, but as the course progresses, we're going to focus more on how does an idea, how does a vision for a better future actually pragmatically manifest and turn into action. I also just wanted to remind you that the core values of the Haas School of Business are explicitly stated and are made present in many of our interactions and classes. And these are principles that guide us as a community of learners: question the status quo, confidence without attitude, students always, and beyond yourself. So this is an example of core values. We call them defining principles here, but these are principles or virtues that we hold dear and that we try as community members with a shared vision for a better world. This informs how we practice. So values very much inform the how we go about things. These are the agreements we make with our collaborators, with our stakeholders. Now, another thing you're going to start to learn more about, and that I want you to start to pay more attention to as the class progresses, is what are the skill sets needed to manifest vision into reality? Visioning, this exercise that you did last time, was really helpful. Just imagining, giving yourself the freedom to imagine what something could become from your, initial place of maybe frustration or dissatisfaction, unlocking from that frustration for a minute and imagining something better. And then there are a lot of skill sets involved with translating vision into action. Also, the art of enrolling others in your mission and your vision. And then a key skill of all change makers and entrepreneurial change makers is to be resourceful. That means working with what you've got and getting other resources under your direction to join your mission, join your initiative. Now, entrepreneurs have values, they have skill sets, they also use different tool sets. So the creative tension model, for example, is a tool set. Design thinking or systems thinking, forms of collaboration and co-creation are also tool sets. Ways of organizing people. Remember, Saru talked to us about organizing. These are all tool sets of change makers. So now I'd like to invite you into a little exercise. And what I'd like to do is have you think about pattern recognition. I want you to think back across the semester so far, and Eva or Jordan's going to post a link to the syllabus in the chat if you want, because pages 4, 5, and 6 of the syllabus will remind you of all the course topics and the people who were here. And we're going to ask you to go into your homeroom and you're going to grab a Jamboard, which will also be posted in chat now, based on your homeroom number. We're going to give you about 5 minutes to build a Jamboard of ideas of traits and characteristics that you recognize across the different guests that we've had. What do you see that's in common? And I was so profoundly moved by Ade Briones' presentation from the Shiue tribe, where she talked about pattern recognition and pattern language as an actual language in the Native American community. And so I want you to collaborate together and build a board of possible patterns. Now I guess I get to do the breakout room, right? So, okay, I can do that. Okay, so how long is the breakout room? 5 minutes? 4 minutes.
Okay. A little bit less. I'm working on opening access to the Jamboards really quickly. So just give me 1 second.
Okay. Any questions on my instruction? Okay. I'm going to set the breakout rooms now, Jordan. Is that okay?
Yeah, they just can't access the boards yet. That's the problem.
I think I can change the settings. So if we wait just 30 seconds, then I should be able to pop a new link in the chat, and then we should be able to head out.
Great. Thanks for your patience. So while you're doing that, you can also be looking at the syllabus. You can be thinking about the people who really spoke to you. You can think about the traits and characteristics that really stood out to you. You can make some notes on this, and then we'll get you into the homeroom.
Well, looks like everyone can access it. So
great. Have fun. All right, welcome back. Thanks for bearing with the technical logistics, but now what we'd like you to do is go to this menti.com site and use this code 515-77763 and enter into this word cloud what the top 3 characteristics that showed up on your Jamboard. We can do a quick crowdsource of everyone's feedback. Great, looking great. Try to do this as quickly as you can, if you don't mind. This is also a great way for us to take attendance. Neat. I love this real-time idea generation. All right. Well, Eva, we'll let this keep going, but without further ado, maybe you can share it in its final form in the link or in the announcement. Thank you. All right, without further ado, it's a great honor and pleasure to introduce you to Sophie Egan. Sophie is the author of a wonderful book called Devoured, and her most recent book called How to Be a Conscious Eater, which is a really useful, practical guide to really a lot of the things we worked on early on in this class. And Sophie's been a regular collaborator with me. She teaches at Stanford. She writes for the New York Times. She now has her own consulting practice called Full Table Solutions. And right out of graduate school, she went to work with the Culinary Institute of America and developed some of the really interesting professional network and educational programs to get chefs and food service operators designing and delivering healthier and more sustainable meals. So she is a real expert in this field, and it's a real honor to have her with us tonight. Welcome, Sophie.
Thank you so much, Will, and thank you to the teaching team for all your behind the scenes work. It is such a pleasure to be with you this evening. As Will mentioned, I am a proud UC Berkeley alum and the School of Public Health. I earned my MPH with a focus on health and social behavior, all with a concentration on food systems. And it really means so much to be back with you. This is my third time here at Edible Ed, second time as guest host, and it was just 8 years ago that I was in all of your seats. I had the pleasure of taking this class not once, but twice during both the years of my master's program. That's how much I loved it. And I really just can't explain how much it has shaped my worldview and really has been pivotal throughout the course of my life and throughout the course of my career. So I hope it will be for all of you as well. So 7 years after graduating from Cal, I'm now based in Boulder, Colorado, and I work on food systems change through both production and consumption, supporting transformation both top down and bottom up. I will briefly tell you a bit about my background and the work that I'm currently doing. And then after that, as Will mentioned, we are joined tonight by two extraordinary women, Dr. Linda Shiue and Turow-Paul. And overarching topic for tonight is the interconnected nature of climate and food justice. So as you can see from this slide, I wear a lot of hats, and that's because I really work to shift systems. So thinking from the production side of systems change, I'm the founder of Full Table Solutions, a consulting practice, and my mission is to accelerate solutions at the intersection of food, health, and climate. You will learn all about my values throughout this talk, and I am absolutely a student, always a lover of lifelong learning. So I started this practice a year ago after 5.5 years at the quote unquote real CIA, shout out in the chat, and led these really transformational initiatives for the food service industry. I'll tell you more about that. One of those programs called Menus of Change in just a moment. With Full Table Solutions, really the central problem that I'm trying to solve is that there is so much good work happening nationally, regionally, globally around food, health, and climate. But more often than not, it's not coordinated, it's not measured, and it's not moving fast enough. So under this umbrella of my consulting work, I do some project-based work. For example, I recently conducted an international study on perceptions of regenerative agriculture with Alpha Food Labs, an innovation agency that's focused on food that's better for people and planet. But mainly I spend my time fulfilling 3 really exciting leadership roles on a long-term basis. So you can think of me as adjunct team members at these 3 organizations, and all of their work is interconnected. And that again is by design to really be able to shift things forward through a system. So at Stanford R&DE Stanford Dining, I'm the Senior Advisor for Sustainable Food Systems. I lead a number of new climate action initiatives, and I support long-standing racial equity initiatives. As one example, we are currently leveraging Stanford Dining's institutional purchasing power to help reverse the disappearance of Black farms. There, I also have the pleasure of supporting 2 visionary leaders, Eric Montel, Executive Director of Stanford Dining, and Dr. Shirley Everett, Senior Associate Vice Provost for Residential and Dining Enterprises. And one of the many things that I love about working with them is that they fully embrace the potential of multi-solving, addressing multiple imperatives from human health and nutrition to racial equity and gender equity, from water footprint and carbon footprint to animal welfare and workplace conditions, all through the decisions that we make as an institutional food service program. And it's this multi-solving notion that's the broad theme I want to offer you today. So in food systems change in general, it's essential to hold multiple imperatives, multiple end goals in parallel, or really more appropriately in a braid, intricately interwoven with one another, and to find ways to navigate tensions whenever trade-offs are presented. The best case scenario is where possible you can find the win-wins for both human and environmental health, or even better, the win-win-win-win-wins for taste, nutrition, equity, climate, supporting local economies, and beyond. So one example of multi-solving that you read about in your readings is regenerative farming, right? In the Yes magazine piece, it has the potential to nourish soil, increase nutrient density of the crops, sequester carbon, increase farmer economic resilience, boost biodiversity, and produce food that's more flavorful. Those are the kind of solutions that I am most excited to work on. So I'm also co-director of the Menus of Change University Research Collaborative, which I'll tell you more about in a moment. But what's really exciting about that initiative, which is co-presented by the CIA, is that it layers in the often overlooked importance of deliciousness, flavor as a tool for public health and climate action. And lastly, but certainly not least, I serve as Director of Strategy for the Food for Climate League, a nonprofit research collaborative whose mission is to democratize sustainable eating. Food for Climate League brings in yet another critical dimension, which is mental health. And Eve will speak more about this, but it's an essential lens to include in this conversation that, again, is too often overlooked. So over on the consumption side, we'll mention that I am a contributor for the New York Times. And what I love there is I answer reader questions about food and health through the Ask Well platform. And often what I do is actually bring in an environmental or social lens that the reader didn't include in the question, and help to broaden and make more holistic the evaluation of the food in question, talking about traceability consideration, for example, how food was produced, or maybe an impact that that food has on others, such as food allergens. So that experience and others led to my latest book, How to Be a Conscious Eater. And today my goal is to walk you through some frameworks at a few different levels of the food system that bring this multi-solving win-win-wins concept to life. So as an individual, you as an eater, I'll speak to that from the perspective of my book, institutions, food service providers such as colleges and universities, hospitals, K-12 schools, and employer-based food programs, and then food retail. So grocery, foods that you get in the grocery store, packaged foods, CPG is often referred to. And so first we'll start with this lens of the individual and how truly you can make a difference through your own food purchases. With this book, I aim to empower eaters to align their food choices with their values. And to do that, I suggest that when you're evaluating whether a food is worth your hard-earned grocery dollars, you ask yourself 3 questions. Is it good for me? Is it good for others? And is it good for the planet? To me, good for me means the whole me, the whole you. Nutrition, health, personal dietary needs and restrictions, absolutely. But also joy, nostalgia, pleasure, comfort. Does it feed not just your body, but your soul? Good for others. This refers to all the people and animals affected from farm to fork throughout the food system. So contending with issues like labor conditions for farm workers, animal welfare, wages, tipping, and discrimination in the restaurant industry and beyond. And then good for the planet. This involves making choices that do not damage and, whenever possible, even restore the ecosystems impacted by food production. This is this concept of regeneration. Considerations in this domain include the long-term vitality of wildlife habitats, rivers and lakes, forests and fisheries, prairies and plains, and the ocean, as well as air quality. So reducing carbon and water footprints of food are central to this lens. For me, conscious eating is most definitely not a diet. It is a decision-making compass for the long haul. I really aim to help eaters avoid this very traditional, very siloed thinking when evaluating the merits of a food by instead looking at a food through simultaneous apertures, almost like wearing 3 pairs of glasses at the same time. To give you a sense, a kind of concrete example of something that's good for you, others, and the planet, there's good reason that there's so much attention to foods that come from the plant kingdom, or what I call stuff that comes from the ground. So I have a whole section in the book about this, and really what we're talking about here is ideally whole, minimally processed plant-based foods. So legumes, whole grains, fruits, vegetables, oils, plant oils, seeds, nuts, herbs, spices, and so forth. And this definitely hits the bullseye as far as many concurrent steps in the right direction. Linda is going to speak to this as well. You will see her awesome t-shirt. And really this notion though of plant-rich diets, often called plant-forward, plant-centric, it doesn't necessarily mean going full vegan or vegetarian. Power to you if you do, but it includes those options and in general represents this overall emphasis in your eating pattern on foods that are plant-based versus animal-based, really with flexibility built in. And there are many reasons for this, which is that by and large, foods that come from the plant kingdom have a better impact on human health and a lower impact on the environment. And because no animals are involved, you're taking that element out of the equation. And then the impacts of industrial livestock production on both livestock themselves and factory farm workers and surrounding communities are also taken off the table. So you can see where it's really, there's this tremendous alignment, right? And this is a fantastic diagram from Barilla Center for Food and Nutrition. But when looking for these coexisting wins, I do want to mention a great point from the Food First article about climate smart agriculture, which is that we also have to look upstream to ensure that we're looking at root causes and applying systems thinking. You can't simply promote, say, climate smart agriculture without including the premise of systems change. So just a sort of caveat about looking for this kind of checklist. It's all under the assumption that for win-win-win approaches to hold water, in general, we're talking about really substantial systemic transformation. So now I want to hear from all of you about, on this individual level, what new food choice have you made over the past year that's more sustainable or socially just? So I think we can go ahead and launch the poll. And options are wasting less food, supporting BIPOC businesses, buying local, gardening or growing my own food, understanding the cultural origins of food, cooking with legumes, all of the above, or other. I'd love to see what answers you put into the chat. Buying ugly produce to reduce food waste. Awesome, that's a great example. So we'll just give this another second. We're at 75% voted. It's looking like wasting less food might be the winner. Close tie with buying local. It's hard to say here, but those are definitely looking like the top two. And please, throughout the rest of this, as you think of great examples, I'd love to see folks sharing with each other kind of your favorite more sustainable or more socially just example. Definitely that wasting less food. That is fantastic news for all kinds of reasons that we will talk about later on. Climate impact being a really big one, and of course, budgetary savings as well. So I want to shift now to not just the moving from the individual lens to the institutional setting. So large volume food service operators, these are, again, people feeding large numbers of people, such as Cal Dining, for instance. These are really interesting opportunities for change, and there are two great frameworks I wanted you to be aware of. One is menus of change principles. These are evidence-based and really an integrated roadmap for aligning optimal nutrition with planetary boundaries in a large operator's procurement strategy and menu design. I mentioned that I'm the co-director of the Menus of Change University Research Collaborative, and this is an incredible network of 60 plus colleges and universities all around the US and abroad that's accelerating the implementation of those 24 principles you saw on the previous slide by using campus dining halls as living laboratories, when we can, of course, COVID allowing. So co-founded and jointly led by CIA and Stanford, UC Berkeley is actually a founding member as well. So you might have seen these principles in the dining halls, or you will in the future. And again, what's really central that you see in this diagram is this idea of multiple lenses. In order to shift health to healthier, more sustainable eating patterns for all, and starting in a college campus setting, we have to work not only across disciplines in terms of the research to understand behavior, but across departments and functions. So you can think of every campus as its own regional food system, right? It has eaters, suppliers, distributors, chefs, operators, diners, nutritionists, sustainable food program managers, procurement officers, and so forth. And they all need to be at the table. I really also love the Good Food Purchasing Program. I don't know if you've all heard about this yet, but this is also originated in the Bay Area. It's been embraced by numerous school districts, hospital systems all around the country. It was just adopted by New York City, which is huge. Oakland School District, for instance. And it's a remarkably comprehensive framework for bringing together multiple values-based purchasing imperatives: local economies, environmental sustainability, valued workforce, animal welfare, and nutrition. So these have much in common, but what you see is that values-based institutional purchasing is so exciting because the scale is tremendous, the ability to shift supply chains, and because you're looking at an opportunity to provide equitable access to foods that are better in all of these different categories, ensuring that these options are available to everyone, not just the person who can, shop at Whole Foods. And then on the retail side, speaking of Whole Foods, B Corp is actually a really phenomenal kind of certification for socially and environmentally responsible business practices for not just food companies, but businesses in general. You might have heard of the triple bottom line framework, to throw yet another one at you, and that's aligning people, planet, and profit. And you can ask Professor Rosenzweig all about B Corp because he's there from the inception, but it's a really, really exciting framework that's just growing like crazy. And it's cool to see not just food companies, small kombucha brands and coffee roasters, but all the way up to Danone, a $6 billion company that's the largest certified B Corp in the world. And really, I think one of the questions is, what your vision is in the world. And one of mine is that the default is that the marketplace is inherently one in which all of these critical imperatives are aligned. Oops, jumping ahead. So what you'll see as a common thread through all the frameworks I've shared for you is that food is one of the most powerful and yet most overlooked tools for climate action. Full stop. Project Drawdown is an excellent organization. They compiled a list of over 80 climate solutions. And you can see, these are the list of the top 10. At the very top, number 1 is reducing food waste. So hats off to all of you who have adopted this in the past year. Number 3 most effective climate solution, plant-rich diets. These beat out these more commonly targeted solutions in energy and transportation sectors. And it's just so important to understand the power of this. You had a Civil Eats article interview with by Anna Lepay with Michael Clark, the Oxford researcher who co-authored the study in Science last fall that really underscores the essential role of food system change to addressing the climate crisis. And I love the way he summarized the situation, this kind of 3-part takeaway. Quote, 1, food matters to climate, and if we continue eating the way we are, it will result in catastrophic climate change. 2, there is a lot we can do. 3rd, everyone has a role to play. Consumers, businesses, food processors, everyone, end quote. And this is absolutely right. This is a huge call to action. And it's why it's simply unacceptable when food is left out of the climate conversation, just as it's unacceptable when health is left out of climate conversations, or racial equity, or gender, or income inequality. And all of this brings me to yet one more really exciting concept that's gaining traction, much deserved traction, called intersectional environmentalism. So to quote from their website, this was largely inspired by Professor Kimberly. I'd love to see in the chat, actually, how many of you have heard of this. Really, it draws on her work in critical race theory, which it says that intersectional environmentalism is an inclusive form of environmentalism that advocates for the protection of all people and the planet. It identifies the ways in which injustices affecting marginalized communities and Mother Earth are interconnected, end quote. So, you will see many different terms tossed around. I'm just going to wrap up now and we're going to shift to breakouts now so that you can actually share amongst yourself what you think about all these different concepts. But I definitely wanted to point you to a book that brings this idea to life beautifully. I can't recommend it enough, All We Can Save. And just on this topic of climate justice, one of the biggest climate injustices globally is that the communities who contribute least to the climate crisis suffer the most from its impacts, from extreme weather events and heat to climate migration and food scarcity. So you saw the climate justice definition in your article. I won't relist it here, but really we just want to hear from all of you in your breakout rooms, what a justice lens reveals about climate change and what other terms you're finding useful in advancing these kinds of dialogues. So with that, I will let our fabulous teaching team send you off to your breakouts and be sure to use your Jamboards.
Sophie, really great. Fantastic.
Glad to hear. Will.
Great organization, clarity, energy. Really great.
Thank you. That means a lot. I'm sorry, Jordan, I was over by a minute.
No, you were fabulous.
No, you're great.
Okay. Yeah, I was like, oh, should I cut? Lots of frameworks. I could also just suggest that the report out be just in chat. What do you think?
Yeah, that may save a little bit
I
of.
was thinking that would
Yeah,
be
we can save the chat too and share it. So
Right.
we can edit it. You know, we can take it and we can cut it and we can put it.
okay.
Um,
Okay, great. Then I'm just going to go ahead and transition to break right after, right?
okay, let me know that
Okay.
I somehow lost my run of show.
Report outs, we're supposed to be at 53 for
Okay.
4 minutes. So Jordan, you tell me what you'd like to do. Do you want, we can just, you can give them more time and we can skip the report outs. Do you want me just to start the break?
I think if we still have time to do the report out if you want.
Okay, we'll just keep it
Yeah, it's
everything
early. It's actually a little early for the break even, Sophie, so.
at 6:57.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, no, at 6:57 it would be fine, but we'll bring them back at 6:54, correct?
Let me check.
And then we could do report out in chat for 2 minutes, and then you could go to the break.
Okay.
I think we want to bring them back at 52.
At 52?
Yep.
Okay. Then do you want to take that slide down so people don't just leave when they come back?
Okay, so we'll do until the original time, 57.
Yep, exactly. And the class tends to share out well via chat. So maybe if you want to just look at that and call them out.
Great.
Okay, so I'm confused. Did you want to come back at 6:52 or 6:57?
Come back at 52 and then go to break at 57.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. And sorry, you were just saying that people share out in chat, and then is the best thing for me to, do I unmute them?
Yeah, or you can just start voicing some of what you're seeing and
yeah, I'll definitely do that. I just didn't know if it sounds like we have time. I can call on a few people to elaborate. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, they're coming back now.
All right. Welcome back, folks. They're trickling in slowly.
Yeah, you have about 10 seconds more, Sophie, until everybody's back.
Oh, that's great to know.
Yeah. 4, 3, 2, 1. Everybody's back now.
Oh, that was exciting. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had productive discussions, and I invite you now to share in the chat kind of some report outs from those breakouts. Go ahead and share in the chat what you shared either personally or kind of some ideas that brewed within your small groups. And then I will, we've got about 4 minutes, and I will call on anyone sharing something really juicy. I was promised that you are a lively chat group, and
Let's try to get at least one response from every homeroom, please.
Excellent. Okay, so from Carrie, BIPOC people more greatly affected by climate, absolutely. Talking about food systems without a justice lens is just talking about gardening. That's an excellent point. The effects of climate change aren't distributed equally, 100%. That was one of the points I mentioned, and I think is worthy of particular attention to anyone who's looking at food-related climate solutions. There's obviously a lot of comments around equity, and just as we wrong the environment, just as we cannot wrong the environment, we need to be ensuring justice. Intersectionality and collaboration, great to see this. Lots of good comments now coming in. I can't keep up with them all. Community-based organizing. Interesting point here about depoliticizing conversations about climate change. Eve is going to speak about that in a moment, and the language that we use is so important in the extent to which it invites as inclusive a population as possible. Climate change, again, disproportionate impacts. And, you know, there's concerns about greenwashing, of course, and performative actions without actually making change. It's a really important component of this to be mindful of. And last time around, a year ago, I was here speaking to all of you about transparency and traceability, and how do you actually know that companies are doing what they say they're doing through these values-based efforts. It's a really, really critical question to bring to this, and there's all kinds of different certifications, third-party audits, and levels of rigor. So that's an excellent point. The concept from the reading, food for feed, not for need, that seems to have resonated as well. So I'd love to have anyone just self-identify if you'd like to share verbally in our final 2 minutes. Otherwise, I'm seeing just some really great points about you know, again, this idea of those most impacted contributing the least, and what is it that we're going to do about this? And that's something good for you to think about, right? I mean, one of the core goals of this course is to identify the problems that you want to solve, if not solve, work on. There typically is not actually an end zone, but really, where do you want to channel your energies? So certainly, I think some great points brewing too about just language, and that was a theme I intended to seed for you ahead of Eve's presentation, with a lot of these different terms. And I think it's important for you too, as you think about your values, organizational values, mission. What are the terms and language that you want to be using, and what do you want to use as kind of galvanizing constructs, ways of articulating the things that you see as problematic and the things that you want to work to improve, because how you define the problems will absolutely affect the ways in which you're able to start to work on solutions toward them. So with that, I think we're going to turn to break. We have a 10-minute break. We'll stop recording and see you all back here at 7 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. You are in for a huge treat in our second hour. So without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce Eve Turow-Paul, a dear friend and colleague. Eve is an author, a globally recognized thought leader, and founder and executive director of Food for Climate League. Her latest book is Hungry: Avocado Toast, Instagram Influencers, and Our Search for Connection and Meaning. Through her writing, consultancy, ETP insights, and nonprofit leadership, Eve focuses on harnessing food culture as a tool for mental, physical, and environmental health. Eve, take it away.
Thank you, Sophie, and thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you all this evening. I'm excited to build on the conversation that has already started and really kind of focus in on how we at Food for Climate League are trying to address a lot of these issues. I'm hoping you can see my screen. Please let me know if you can't. And today I'm going to be introducing you to the work of Food for Climate League, and Will has also asked me to talk a little bit about how Food for Climate League came to be, how we all got here. First, just a little bit of context setting. As Sophie mentioned, my name is Eve Turow-Paul. I am an author. Like Sophie, I wear a lot of hats, though not as many hats as Sophie. And previous to Food for Climate League, the main hat that I wore was as writer and consultant. My focus for the last decade plus has really been on investigating the why behind the biggest food and lifestyle trends, assessing, our interest in avocado toast or organic goods or even goat yoga, and looking at what emotional drivers are behind those decisions. So really using food and lifestyle culture as an emotional and sociological lens. I have then taken that research and put it into my work with Food for Climate League to really investigate how we can leverage the existing assets within foodie culture to drive a climate smart food system. So I'm the founder and executive director of Food for Climate League. I am honored to work with Sophie, and I'll be able to share a little bit more about our whole team. But what's Food for Climate League? We are a new 501c3 nonprofit founded midway through 2019 with funding from the Food at Google team. And we're a research collaborative, really focused on creating a new way of talking about food and climate in order to democratize sustainable eating and empower all of us to tackle the climate crisis bite by bite. In order to actually achieve that end goal, we believe that we have to reframe what climate smart eating is to make it easier for people to partake in and make these kinds of habits relevant to all people. We like to say that our goal is to create tested narratives that celebrate delicious, healthy, and insta-worthy foods that are great for us and great for the planet. And as Sophie mentioned before, also great for a lot of companies' bottom lines. A lot of the way that we think about this is how do the words that we currently use to talk about food and climate issues exclude and therefore limit the potential impact of the climate smart food movement, right? How are the words that we use, such as regenerative, biodiversity, veganism, how are those words triggering to some people, making them feel like perhaps this movement is not for them, that it's not speaking to their community and their needs? And how might we talk about climate smart eating in a way that instead will empower, engage, and invite people in as stakeholders to also live in a world full of really great, delicious things to eat? As Sophie said, this is also something that we think about a lot with Food for Climate League, is how the language that we use also triggers feelings of, this might not taste so good, it might not be so filling. Again, this isn't for me, this isn't the comfort food that I am looking for. All of this originates with the words that we use, the language that we use. Food for Climate League is creating food and climate narratives that speak to the many and not the few. In order to do that, in order to democratize sustainable eating, we're really focused right now on researching ways of talking about this topic that will help people feel in control of their health, feel connected to a community, and feeling empowered to change the world, all through climate smart food. So this is my amazing team. As Sophie said, we're all new. All of us are kind of banding together at this moment in time to collectively work on this mission. The list of tool sets that we'll put up at the beginning of this class, were highly relevant to my world. You're going to see a lot of how might we questions here. We really focused in on human-centered design. We work in close partnership with Future Food Institute. They're an organization that works primarily on rapid prototyping and innovation around food and sustainability. We are also very much utilizing the mindset of collective action, bringing together people from disparate areas of the food system to come together as a team and work on this. This is evident, honestly, within our own main staff. Sophie, as our director of strategy, is also leading a group of folks that are really coming together quarterly to exchange insights. We very much believe that no one of us is going to solve this issue by ourselves. We need to be exchanging information and also making sure that we're building upon the research that's being done instead of repeating research that's being done. So I am serving as executive director, Sophie, director of strategy. We're working again in close partnership with those at Future Food Institute. But Will also wanted me to share a little bit of the founding story of Food for Climate League. So I'll hop into that. And I never thought that I would be running a nonprofit. My friend Eliza is actually in this class. She can attest. Never thought that I would be running a nonprofit. And I was, just 2 years ago thinking, how am I going to use all of this research that I've done on millennials and Gen Zers and food trends and use it to actually make a difference on the thing that's keeping me up at night, which is the climate crisis. And all of those things really came to a head at a meeting at Google. It was a conference, the Google Food Lab. The theme was all about biodiversity, had a lot of really powerful, influential people in the room together. And I was there to present on Gen Z, some original research that I'd done. And I was talking about rising rates of anxiety, depression, loneliness, Gen Zers' true obsession with food, and also their concerns about the climate crisis. And I heard from a number of people who work at very, very large CPG companies who feed most of the people in the world. I heard from a number of them saying, oh, millennials and Gen Zers don't actually care about the climate. We know this because we've created sustainable products and they don't buy them. And from all of my experience in the industry working as both a researcher but also as a consultant for these companies, I knew that there really was a mismatch. I knew that there are young people who are deeply passionate about food, who are willing to spend money on food even when it doesn't make financial sense for them. I also know that it is something that is keeping people up at night. Right? We don't hear a lot of people talk about the climate crisis because who wants to be the person at the dinner party who brings up the climate crisis? That is just going to make sure that you're never invited again. It's not something that is uplifting, but that doesn't mean that it's not something that people are concerned about. So a coffee break found myself speaking to Lisa Feldman, who happens to be the director of recipe management at Sodexo, and Dorothy Shaver, who heads up sustainability for Knorr brands at Unilever in the Netherlands. And we said, this is a problem. The words that we are using to describe sustainable food is limiting the reach of these types of food. It's really not connecting the dots for people. How can we fix this? And I'm really excited to hear kind of the framework of this entire class around, what frustrates you in many ways. What can you be working on contributing to? And we honestly just took a coffee break conversation, and a few months later, we're filing to be a 501c3. So I'm going to walk you guys through a little bit of, what our belief system is as it relates to food systems and climate justice. And feel free type in your questions in the chat, and I'll be happy to address them at the end or as I go. As an organization, we wholeheartedly believe that exactly right now, is the perfect time to be connecting the dots between food and climate. I'm going to kind of whiz through these because it sounds like you guys are already familiar with a lot of these statistics, but the food system right now is a major, major cause of problems for both environmental health and human health. But there's also something really exciting happening right now, which is that at the beginning of the pandemic, many people thought, oh, people are going to become way less concerned about the climate crisis because they're going to be so focused on their own personal health. Well, that's not what has happened. In fact, we have seen a rising concern about the climate crisis and sustainability issues right now. The Edelman Trust Barometer said that while 65% of survey takers are concerned about contracting COVID, 72% are concerned about the climate crisis. There's a number of stats. I chose 3 for this slide, but there were about 10 that I was trying to pick between. It's really encouraging to see that in this moment, there's actually renewed interest in the climate crisis. And I can get into all the reasons as to why that will be, why that could be. We all understand right now what a crisis looks like, feels like. We also understand that one person can legitimately make an impact. And food really is the most amazing lever that we have to make an impact when it comes to environmental health and human health. And the pandemic has really set the stage in a unique way. If you talk to anyone in marketing about behavior change, they say you need to strike while someone is going through a moment of life disruption. So usually marketers will try to introduce new behaviors while people are graduating from college, they're having kids. A number of those kind of major life events are happening. Well, right now, every single one of us is in a moment of disruption. And we've been able to see over the last year just how quickly we can create new habits, new food behaviors. That's going to happen again as we start to emerge from the pandemic, knock on wood, and create these new habits as we move forward. We're also in a moment to be addressing the democratization of food and the inherent injustices within our food system that I saw so many of you writing about at the end of that breakout. Democratizing sustainable eating is in and of itself an act of social justice. And we have an opportunity today to be speaking to a much wider group of people than the current industry is speaking to. And I'm going to get into what exactly I mean and how we can make that happen. Food for Climate League began our work with an analysis of saying, okay, how are companies and organizations and governments talking about food and climate issues? And what's working about that messaging, what isn't, and why? So we did a landscape analysis of terms like regenerative, biodiversity, social justice in the context of food, plant forward, food waste, and water. And then we also did a number of expert interviews with people in the industry, in agriculture, but then also in academia. I thought the most interesting interviews that we did were with those who specialize in climate psychology and climate communications. And walking out of that research, we identified really 3 major hurdles for anyone talking about food and climate issues. One, of course, is that we're addressing seriously complex agriculture concepts. What's true at one time of year, one time of place, one soil type, it's going to change, right? It's something that's really, really hard for anyone to wrap their heads around, let alone a public where 98% of Americans don't know a farmer. Then you have the psychological triggers to content around the climate. This was particularly interesting for me with a background in marketing around food, was really learning that the climate is simply a different topic. It will trigger feelings of anxiety, of guilt, of ambivalence at a level that no other topic will. And that's something that we all need to be taking into account as we address these justice issues. And then, of course, anything related to food, you're asking people to make changes to deeply personal food habits. We also uncovered 3 really important mistaken assumptions that are being made in the food and climate movement. The number 1 mistaken assumption that Sophie can talk in depth about is that everyone will take action around climate if they're just educated about it. Sophie has often drawn the line between this and the movement towards healthy eating, right? The Produce Association is evidence of the fact that you can't just tell people to eat their vegetables and they'll do it, right? Just by telling somebody the carbon footprint of something or saying that X, Y, and Z is going to have X, Y, and Z impact, that is not enough to motivate most people to change their behavior. That doesn't mean that the education isn't important. It is just not the entire lever that you need. Number 2 mistaken assumption is that sustainable goods and practices can only resonate with a small portion of the population. Just because only a small portion of the population is currently engaged does not mean that those are the only people there who are willing, eager, and excited to be engaged. Part of what we uncovered really was the wide swath of the global population that's being left out of this conversation. Number 3 is that you have to talk about the climate to stoke climate beneficial behavior change. One of the major takeaways for us was that oftentimes you can lead people to climate smart behaviors without talking about the climate at all. And often the discussion of climate and sustainability issues is actually going to turn off people. Again, this is a really, really triggering, difficult topic for a lot of people. Even if we're not consciously turning away, you are subconsciously, a lot of us are turning off. We also learned that there are many inherent flaws and socially unjust flaws within the current narrative around food and climate. So first, we're often focusing about what's not in the food. It's very much framed in the negative. It's focusing on less waste, less meat. The framing is also often elitist. The conversation is talking to people who have choice, who have accessibility. But the reality is there are a lot of ways to eat sustainably without going vegan or living a zero waste lifestyle or being Gwyneth Paltrow. I often think that a lot of the food and sustainability conversation is speaking to very much a white, Western, and wealthy audience. Again, that is not the only portion of the global population that is eager, interested in eating in a sustainable way. In fact, the communities that really are the foundation of sustainable farming methodologies and cooking, which Linda is going to get into, are often not within that kind of the 3W subset of white, wealthy, and Western. So as an organization, we've been really thinking about how might we create a food system that can provide all eaters with nutritious, delicious, and sustainable foods? How might we celebrate a greater diversity of foods and culinary traditions? And how might we utilize climate smart food and ag to empower communities with tools for impact locally and globally? And how can we do this simply through language? So I'm just briefly going to walk you all through a few examples of how we bring this to life. First and foremost, we believe that we need to be addressing all of our core human needs. So part of our role with Food for Climate League is how can we, through language, illustrate how sustainable eating practices will address our desires, our core desires for control and safety, for community and purpose. And how can we also build on current trends? We don't want to create a new form of food culture. We just want to build on the things that already exist. As many of you indicated in your polling answers, a lot of us are already doing things that are climate smart and taking on new behaviors that are climate smart. How do we simply build on that? So I know that time is short, so I'm going to go through this relatively quickly. But us as an organization are really thinking about how climate smart eating can deliver on our desires for control, autonomy, and safety. That's kind of the core bucket of our needs. So again, no matter what your background is, how can we draw the line between these sustainable ways of eating and nutrient density, accessibility, affordability, right? A lot of the reasons why people have not been wasting as much food during the pandemic, it's not about sustainability. While it is sustainable, and I applaud that, most people are doing it because they don't want to waste money, right? A lot of us have been hit economically. There's so many different ways to frame these ways of eating that, again, can help people feel in control of their own bodies and health, in control of their wallets. And some of that also has to do with simple, clean, zero waste eating as well. We also believe that sustainable eating can deliver on our desire for community and belonging. We are really focused on how we can emphasize heritage, terroir, indigenous traditions, and the biodiversity that is available for us. It's also about seasonality. I often think about how can we create kind of that regional intensity and pride in our food system in a way that will also drive a more biodiverse food system in terms of actual ingredients, but then also diversity in terms of preparation and celebrating the people who are preparing our foods. And then how can we instill a sense of purpose and meaning? How can we connect this way of eating not just to those who care about the climate crisis and are ready and willing to think about that on a day-to-day basis, but also people who want to be celebrating Afro-Indigenous heritage, people who want to be building a new skill set. We can build on the sourdough movement of the pandemic to guide people towards more climate smart behaviors. We really want to make this something that is fun and accessible for as many eaters as possible. So thank you all for listening. I'm happy to take questions if there is any time. I am super conscious of the time that we have. I just want to.
Eve, excellent. So we actually have a couple minutes and a great comment here from James Woods, who says, having a very hard time reconciling democratization of the food system with a transnational conglomerate such as Unilever. Love for you to weigh in on that.
Sorry, I'm not having reconciling transnational. Well, I mean, I think that there's a lot to unpack there, actually. Unilever feeds about 1 billion people a day. They would like to feed more people more times a day, right? Like any other business. I think that the motivations behind any of these organizations, it's pretty complex, but a lot of them really have these sustainability goals. And they want to make sure that they're still going to be financially viable as they move in a more sustainable direction. And so a lot of these companies are thinking about how can we update packaging, incorporate a greater diversity of ingredients in our products, maybe put things out there that people are less familiar with without losing our market share. So part of what we are looking at is how to create that kind of excitement about a recipe, a menu item that perhaps people are less familiar with, by celebrating other aspects of the food, right? It can come down to, instead of calling something meatless, focusing on all of the things that are really delicious and beautiful in a dish. Sophie, I don't know if you have anything actually to add to that.
Well, I think, the main kind of example of this is I gave the Whole Foods example, right? And nothing against Whole Foods, but the point is that for this to be the default, for the options in the marketplace, on retail shelves, in food service settings, in restaurants, in institutional procurement, in SNAP program, in anywhere that people access food, for the foods that happen to be best for human and environmental health to be the defaults, to be so prevalent, so widely available, because of their scale, because of their deliciousness, because of their cultural appropriateness, because of their price points. And what we currently have is a situation in which, by and large, you have to be kind of a salmon swimming upstream to find these options. You have to generally be either motivated by purpose, as Eve mentioned, and so the packaging currently speaks to you, And often there is a higher price point, and sometimes with a trade-off, like it tastes worse or it has a compromising functionality. Examples I give are things like, as much as I love the beeswax wrapping storage wrap instead of plastic wrap. So, there's a lot of things like those kinds of products where it costs more. It's actually a worse user experience, and it's not available to the masses. So that's a little bit of kind of the idea there with partnering with companies that have tremendously large footprints, while, though, to your point, James, holding them accountable, right? And ensuring that there's a there to what they're promising and committing and so forth. So at this point, we actually want to let you all chat amongst yourselves. Even if you have the prompt for the breakout, I'll let you tee everyone up.
I do. So it was a great question, and I do have more thoughts on it, but I might send you a little short message myself. We are going to do a collective visioning exercise, and it sounds like from Will's intro, you guys are well practiced in visioning. I believe, and a lot of social psychologists do as well, that we can't motivate people to take action on something unless they can really envision what that future might be. So I thought this might be a great time for us all to think about what would a climate and food justice what would the world look like if climate and food justice has been achieved? So for some thought starters, I have a full list here for you, but things to think about. What would your table look like? What would your plates look like? Who would be farming your food, serving it, delivering it, cooking it? What would this kind of world taste like? So we're going to give you some time to just envision that it's 2050 and this world of climate and food justice has arrived. What does it look like? Welcome back to everybody. Please, I know that was a very quick brainstorming and collective visioning session, but it would be great to see what people came up with for this future where climate and food justice has been achieved. Please share it in the chat, and I know that we're going to keep the program moving along. Linda is waiting in the wings with an awesome part of the program that I've been looking forward to. I also want to know where you got that t-shirt, Linda. But yes, if everyone can please share in the chat what this future looks like, and then Linda's going to get into more of what it can taste like. And how to take action on that immediately, which I'm super excited about. What does this world look like where climate and food justice has been achieved? A world with free food for all and backyard grown food, where farmers are respected, localized food system, eating produce native to specific states. I love a lot of these ideas. Less starvation, less obesity. Regenerative agriculture. Interesting. I want to put this in the word cloud because there's a lot of overlap here on the themes. Alternative meats also, right? The integration perhaps of the relocalization, going kind of back to the roots of the soil, but then also accelerating that with innovation. Harnessing purchasing power, which is what all Food for Climate League is really all about. Sustainable production and consumption levels at all levels, from farm rights for animals and workers to innovation for personal food shopping. Relationship between food, school cafeterias, farmers, and food sovereignty advocates, right? It's about connecting people back to where their food comes from, which can very much shift food behaviors. Edible gardens everywhere for everyone. Will, I appreciate that. A lot of your students are thinking along the same lines. Students learning to cook and garden their own foods. People aware, right? People who are aware and have more empathy about their impact, right? So again, kind of making those connections. You have much more care for the food if you know how much effort went into growing it, harvesting it, preparing it. I think it's time for me to kind of pass off the baton, but thank you so much, everyone, for listening and for including me in today's discussion.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Eve. Thanks, everyone. Those are some really fun comments, and it's really wonderful to see some themes in there. Especially interesting to see something around kind of shorter supply chains that are more relationship driven. I really like that piece and wholeheartedly share that as well. So now I am so privileged to introduce Dr. Linda Shiue, a physician, chef, and founder of a teaching kitchen for patients at Kaiser Permanente, San Francisco. She is their first director of culinary medicine, such a cool title. And she believes that the best medicine is prevention. Amen to that. Her cooking classes showcase seasonal produce, lavishly flavored with spices and fresh herbs. Her food writing has been published widely, and she's been interviewed frequently on television and in print. Her debut cookbook, Spicebox Kitchen, Eat Well and Be Healthy with Globally Inspired Vegetable-Forward Recipes, was published last week. Let's congratulate her on this exciting release. Lots of balloons and fireworks in the chat, and turn it over to her for a delicious demo. Linda.
Great. Thank you so much, Sophie and Eve, for those really wonderful talks. I found myself wanting to take a lot of notes. I did take some notes, and trying to bring it all into this brief cooking demo. So first, if anyone is cooking along with me, you better get your water boiling now. I had said in the prep that you should pre-cook your pasta, but then I decided not to because I thought hopefully we'll have enough time. My water is taking some time to boil. So get that going if you haven't already. And, as I was hearing Sophie's and Eve's words, I was thinking, I kind of wrote this cookbook to go along with all the messages that you sent out today. It's really, really happy to see so many of them resonate through your presentations, and also actually in the chat and in the polls about what people thought were very practical ways as individuals we can make an impact on climate change. So one of the interesting points I thought that you both brought up was the importance of language, right? So titles of things, the words that we choose, have a very big impact on who we reach as an audience. And and I'm someone who doesn't have any business or marketing background, but I've had to learn a little bit about that in terms of writing my book and trying to market it. Choosing the title for this, or really the subtitle, was kind of key. The subtitle of Spicebox Kitchen is Eat Well and Be Healthy with Globally Inspired Vegetable-Forward Recipes. So vegetable forward was the phrase that we, meaning me with my publishing team, agreed upon, as opposed to vegan or plant-based or plant-forward, or even vegetarian. Those were all thrown around. And the reason why is I thought, well, what am I trying to do with this? There are lots of people who are eating plant-based, and some people consider that completely vegan, no animal products at all. Some people think that's mainly eating vegetable-based products. But I wanted to write a book of recipes, and we don't eat plants, really. We eat vegetables, and we eat produce, and we eat fruit. And so I wanted to focus on the vegetable part of that, so that people would know that that's what they're going to learn from cooking in this book. And then in terms of the globally inspired, that speaks to the importance of diversity. One of the phrases that I've coined in terms of talking about this book now is that I didn't want this to be the kale and quinoa diet. It's so interesting how many times Gwyneth Paltrow and Goop's names have come up in regards to what my book is not. So I want to make this accessible to everybody, no matter what your cultural background is, hopefully no matter what your economic circumstances are, because I truly believe that healthy eating has to be for everybody. It's not on an individual level, in a community level, and certainly with regard to the environment. It really has to be. And I think that people, by eating mainly plant-based or mainly vegetables and produce, that is a great way to achieve that, which I know a lot of you agree with. By featuring recipes that focus on ingredients and flavors from around the world, that's a really good way to make it democratic to people, to make it speak to many different people from many different backgrounds. And so in the book, it's recipes from around the world. Okay, my water is boiling now. So check on your pots if you're cooking along with me. So the recipe today is very, very simple. I wanted to make it something that you already might be eating some version of, and make it a little bit better for you. So a lot of us will eat pasta. I encourage whole grain pasta whenever possible. Jordan kindly brought to my attention that for those observing Passover, that grains might be off the off the plate, off the table. And so I gave a few suggestions for substitutions, and I found that, yes, the market has heard you, and there are some great non-grain-based pastas that are available there that I found. Or you can use vegetable noodle substitutes like zoodles, zucchini-based noodles, or sweet potato noodles, or something like that. It'll be different, but have the same kind of shape. So, but the point in using whole grains or whole grain pasta, if you're cooking a more traditional pasta, is that you're getting that added nutritional benefit. You're getting fiber, you're getting B vitamins, you're getting iron, all these things which are important in making this vegetable-based cooking good for your health and adequate and complete. So while that's cooking, I'm going to talk a little bit about the other ingredients. I wanted to make this a pantry-based recipe, again, because that's a very sustainable, economically way to eat. And so that means if you have stocked your pantry, and I devote a good section of the book to how to stock your pantry, then you don't have to go to the grocery store that often to be able to cook and nourish yourself. So we have some sardines here. These sardines, canned sardines, are wild caught. So look for words like that that will make a difference, as opposed to, farmed fish. I don't think they're making farmed sardines now. It's not really necessary. There are lots of, there probably are actually. So choose wild caught when you can, better for the environment. And why sardines? These are a small fatty fish. They are very abundant in the wild. They have a lot of nutrition in terms of omega-3 fatty acids, which are important for your overall physical as well as mental health. So talking about your whole health. And they have a lot of flavor, and they're inexpensive, and they're shelf stable. One of the other talking points from both of your talks that I wanted to bring up is reducing food waste. I have a few pages on this subject in my book as well, because obviously it's the whole waste not, want not. It's always been true around the world, around the generations. If you don't waste, you will save money, and obviously that will have a huge impact on the environment as well. So things to look at when you're using pantry staples are not confusing best by dates with expiration dates. This is a huge problem, I think, that we need a lot of education around. Many people mistake that whatever date they see on their package as being the date after which it's actually dangerous to consume the food item, and that's not true. So that's just one of my key points in looking at pantry items and trying to reduce food waste. The other ingredients are also pantry staples. I have some cooked white beans here, and for the Passover substitution for that, I thought something very similar in texture and flavor would be soaked raw cashews. So that would be pre-soaked in either hot water for about 20 minutes or in room temperature water for maybe 2 to 4 hours, and then drain them before using them. So canned beans are good to have in your pantry, or dried beans. Very inexpensive, they last forever, and are an excellent source of protein and fiber. Then we have some vegetables. So I have some sliced tomatoes here, and we have some herbs. And I have in this little jar here, both basil and mint. And another way to reduce food waste is to make substitutions. So if you don't have mint, use basil. If you don't have basil, use mint, or whatever fresh herb you may have around. I'm storing this like you would a bouquet of flowers in just some water. And that's a really good way to keep herbs fresh, although mine are starting to wilt after they've been here for a while. A good way to do that also is just to turn any wilting herbs into either an herb oil by blending it with some olive oil, or into pesto, or even just blending it together and storing it in the freezer in little ice cube trays. So these little hints and tips about reducing food waste they may seem small, but they do add up over time. Okay, so I'm gonna check before I continue, see where my pasta is here. All right, so whole grain pasta does take a little bit longer to cook than regular white pasta, and that's because of the fiber that is so good for you. But I think we're about done here. And the reason why I waited to cook this for you is to show you not only how quickly this comes together, but the great culinary trick of how to make your pasta taste great by saving some of the pasta water before you drain it. So I'm just showing you how to do this safely. Use something with a handle that is heat safe. It can be a Pyrex, a glass measuring cup, or even a mug that is big enough that your hands don't get into the pot. And all you're gonna do is dip into that, and you just wanna save about a cup of the pasta water. Pasta water is really this great ingredient that allows you to make a sauce out of, kind of nothing, and add flavor because it has starches in it. It will allow your other ingredients to blend with it. So I've taken out the pasta water. I'm just gonna take a second to, in real life, drain my pasta, and I'll be right back to put it together.
If anyone has questions, feel free to drop them into the chat. And thanks so much, Jordan, as well. We can answer as we go. Hopefully some of you can't drop your questions because you're cooking along.
Yeah. All right, so I've drained my pasta, and now we're just going to add the rest of the ingredients. Really simply, we're going to break up the sardines with a spoon, or I have a fork here, into bite-sized pieces. And we're going to use the oil that the sardines are packed in to actually make the sauce. So I'm just going to literally put this into the pasta directly. So the oil that is in here, I think these are packed in olive oil, but it also is mixed with the oils that come from the sardines themselves. For people who are eating completely plant-based, I give suggestion for capers to give a little bit of the brininess. And then you'd want to add some olive oil to get some fat into that for flavor. And then the next step here is going to be to add just a little bit of the pasta water. And you're going to stir it, and it's going to emulsify with the oils from the sardines and cling to the pasta and make a sauce with it. So that's all you can do there. And you're not going to use all of the pasta water, but use enough so that it's a little bit saucy, and that'll be to your taste. And I'm just going to bring it closer to the camera so you can see. It's actually a little hard to see with all of this, but there's just not too much liquid in here. It's mainly clinging to the pasta.
And Linda, just to confirm we understand, so we add the sardines on top of the pasta, is that right?
You're going to mix it into it. So yeah, directly. And as you saw, I'm using the same pot. You're going to also use less water if you're using fewer pans. And so we're trying to do this as a one pot dish. So I put the drained pasta back in, and then I add everything just basically goes into the pot.
Perfect.
One pot, right? Yeah. So I also have my white beans here, and I'm just going to add those in. So those have been drained and rinsed in water to reduce some of the sodium content of canned beans. That's often a question, aren't canned foods bad for us? And that goes back to label reading. Don't read the label that says low sodium. Look at how much sodium it actually has. Because I've often found that the ones that are labeled low sodium actually might have more than one that might say packed in sea salt. So always read the milligrams of sodium per serving and make sure that those serving sizes match up so you're comparing apples to apples. All right, so I have my beans there. And then I have some sliced grape or cherry tomatoes, just sliced in half. So you're adding both color, it looks really pretty now, obviously flavor and nutrition with this. And it's just going to kind of bring the tomatoes to a kind of lukewarm temperature. If you wanted to cook those a little bit more, you could turn the heat back on and do that as well. And then the last part is really just adding the herbs and then some spices for flavor. So for herbs, since I have both mint and basil here, I'm going to use a little bit of both. You can tear the leaves by hand, or you can chop them roughly with your knife. I'm going to show you how I would chop them. So first, you're just going to pick the leaves off of the stem and put that on your cutting board. So a lot of people think of herbs really as garnish, and I want you to think of it differently, as actually just another vegetable, meaning that there are nutritional benefits, there's fiber, there are a lot of antioxidants. That kind of the pungent flavor of herbs is a testament to how nutritious they are and how many antioxidants they have. So I use a lot of herbs. There are a lot of herbs used in Mediterranean cuisine, which this recipe uses the ingredients of.
Linda, two questions for you. One on plastic lining of cans, what to make of that? And the other question is if you have a good rule of thumb for sodium in beans, like is there a threshold folks are looking for?
Okay, so for plastic lining of cans, so it's really BPA, is the endocrine disrupting, hormone disrupting chemical that we're avoiding. You can either look for ones that are labeled BPA free, which increasingly there are more of, or you can get beans that are available in Tetra packs. Those are those foil packs, which are used for juice boxes and things like that. Many times beans are available in those as well, and those are always BPA free. Sorry, the other question.
Do you have a rule of thumb for sodium? Like you said, check the label. So what's the kind of threshold that you think people should be?
Yeah, I think per serving, I've seen it as high as, I would say, even like 300 milligrams per serving. That's quite a bit, because for most people, we want your total sodium intake in a day to be 2,000 milligrams or 2 grams. And so if you're already having in just your, a third cup of your can of beans, close to 300 milligrams, that's using a lot of your sodium budget for the day. So somewhere that's closer to 100 milligrams or less would be better. And the trick of rinsing it actually can reduce the sodium. So if you can't get the one that has a lower sodium count, we'll reduce the sodium by about half.
Great, yeah, and there's a comment in the chat about cooking your own beans in advance, freezing them. That also can certainly help. Question for Jade is, curious, Dr. Shiue, what you think of hospital food and how that can be improved.
Yes.
The person says, when I think of hospital food, I think of Jell-O, which I feel should not be served to hospital patients. Excellent question. And quick time check, you've got 3 minutes. So if you can.
Okay, so I'm just going to quickly chop the herbs. So as you've seen here, I've just kind of pushed it all into a pile, and I'm just going to roughly chop them. You can also just tear them by hand. So, and I will answer that excellent question as soon as I throw it all together. So we've got our herbs here, some chili flake. So use spices. Spices also reduce your need for sodium because it adds more flavor and also have a lot of health properties. Chili peppers are associated with lower risk for heart disease, and they promote a longer life in general. I'm using black pepper here, a source of many antioxidants, also flavor. So the key here is you want flavor, no matter how simple and inexpensive these ingredients are, and all of that. If it doesn't taste good, nobody's going to eat it. So I will show you what this looks like, and then try to answer the hospital food question, because it's a very good one. It's a very complex one, and one that I've also tried to help work on a little bit. So here's our pasta. So hopefully have dinner tonight. The other quick tip on reducing food waste is my lunch is always leftovers from dinner. So try to make enough that you have leftovers. I unfortunately, because of my job, never have time for going out for lunch. And so that would involve actually getting food. So I always bring my food, and but it's actually often the time of day that I look forward to most, because I know what I'm going to eat, that I've cooked it. So to answer the question about hospital food, it would be great to say, yes, we will not have any sort of comfort foods that are, have added sugar, etc. in the hospital. And we certainly don't want to do what was the case when I was in medical school, when there was actually a McDonald's in the hospital. That is something that was actually very common. Now, I graduated from medical school more than 20 years ago, but at that time, this was normal. I mean, so at least at that time, doctors had stopped smoking. That wasn't the case early on, but there is still fast food in the hospital. So we don't want that. And I have actually tried and successfully to offer as an option a completely plant-based menu at the Kaiser Hospital. And, I found that we actually had a lot of plant-based items that were available in our commissary, and we just weren't ordering them. So it was a matter of just somebody looking at it and offering it to patients. But when it came to saying taking away the Jell-O cups or the pudding cups, people said, not everybody's in the hospital for a heart attack, and that is true. Some people are there because of some great injury. Some people are there because of cancer. And for people like that, if you take away all their options for something that actually feeds their soul, that in the long run is a very small impact. I can understand the reasoning for still allowing that to be maybe not highlighted on the menu, but available to people. But hospital food can be improved a ton. You know, it's already come a long way since I was in medical school, but I think, you know, we are limited by several things. One is sourcing, you know, where do we get our food from? Kaiser's actually doing a really great job with that and making it very sustainable. That's been a goal for the last decade, and we've actually achieved many of those goals environmentally. The next step is, you know, cost, right? So it has to be inexpensive enough that the hospital can do it. But this is where all these business things that I don't think about, like, you know, the power of sourcing as a group and being able to get things at a better price from whoever your sources are, or, you know, making some sort of consortium of local growers. All of these things are possible, and they're all things that I look forward to seeing more in the future. And I know that we're out of time, so.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. I echo all of those comments. Gorgeous dish. Thank you so much, Linda. Lots of comments in the chat about how delicious that looks. Really appreciate you and all the incredible work you're doing. Congratulations on the cookbook. So just to kind of tie everything together, you know, we heard a lot today about, first and foremost, food choices as one of the most impactful tools in your tool belt as an individual for climate action on a daily basis. And then, of course, collectively in the aggregate. Also really a focus today on systems thinking, often to the point of the importance of language. Another theme, we talk about food chains or supply chains, when in reality, food systems are not linear. They're complex webs of many, many actors and stakeholders who are all deeply interconnected, and these are dynamic, right? So you have to really keep many imperatives in mind simultaneously with the sense of intersectionality. And also, you know, thinking about where we're headed in the future, to the collective visioning exercise. For so long, the food system has focused on just one or two imperatives at the expense of everything else: efficiency, yield, profit, right? The future food systems in which climate and food justice have been achieved, the visions that you pictured, are really ones, it's a food system in which there's harmony among many different simultaneously important factors: human health, community connectedness, racial justice, gender equity, economic resilience, local and regional supply chains that are thriving and can withstand shocks such as COVID and climate change. So really thinking carefully about your own mission, vision, values, and how you can work on some of these issues, especially the gross injustice of really those being most impacted by climate change, being the ones who are least responsible for it. So really thinking hard in the weeks to come, months, years of your life, to identify the values that you wish to express through your food choices as an individual, and in turn, how you can translate ideas into action to help imbue those into organizational values. Those in turn can help shape policy, markets, and social movements, all toward this healthy, climate smart, truly just transition that our food system needs. We hope you have enjoyed tonight's session, and a few action items. Next week's homework is to focus your energy on identifying pathways as a food systems change maker. Just a quick, easy task, of course, but one that's so worth taking. And then keep your eyes open about how to obtain special ingredients for next week's class with La Cocina. You'll be in for another treat. Thank you so much again to our hosts, and have a wonderful night, everyone. Take care.